I don't think anyone thinks that a war between the US and Russia, whether direct or via proxies, is a good idea, but every day the news looks worse and worse. Not necessarily in a way that's gonna lead to actual direct conflict, but we're sure gonna spend a lot of money getting ready for one. Anyway, the updates we have now in terms of what's going on around the whole Ukraine issue is that Joe Biden has announced the US is gonna be deploying thousands of troops in Germany, Poland, and Romania, as they also officially acknowledge the Russian buildup outside of Ukraine for the first time. So Joe Biden sending about 2,000 US based troops to Poland and Germany and shifting roughly 1,000 additional soldiers from Germany to Romania as demonstrations of American commitments to NATO allies. And so you send some to Germany, you take some out of Germany. It's a fun little musical chairs thing we're gonna do. That is of course in addition to the earlier deployment of 8,500 troops in the US, including airborne units being put on heightened alert. They're gonna be part of a NATO response force intended to bolster the alliance's eastern flank. So by the way, like this is obviously significant. Let's bear this in mind, but let's also bear in mind that the US has standing military forces in basically every corner of the world, including 75 to 80,000 troops in Europe specifically, just in general. So it is more troops and they are being moved and it's being said to be about this, but there are always a lot of American troops in Europe. So that said, Dan, we haven't spoken since this whole thing flared up. What are your thoughts?
It's really unfortunate that I've just started keeping track of this since I started doing my own political show, but it feels like every January or February begins with the United States almost getting into some conflict. Like we had Iran a couple of years ago and under multiple different presidents. It's like a new year, new war. It's one of our New Year's resolutions. But no, like I was with all this coverage, war coverage, and American media is often just parroting what the administration at any given time is saying. So I'm looking at coverage in a lot of other different places, and I'm seeing what the situation is like on the ground in Ukraine. And in Ukraine, you have citizens who are training with wooden guns, essentially, who are getting ready to fight and take up arms against like the Russians in this situation. So it's definitely very tense here. That the fact that you have individuals who are wanting to take up arms as well in that way. But I'm not feeling really good about the need, as a lot of folks are, the need for the United States to continue to ramp up tensions in this situation when we know that Vladimir Putin seems to be very intent on creating chaos and destabilization around Ukraine. So I don't know if like Joe Biden, if it's smart for us to be playing into this game so much. That being said, of course, we have sanctions that you'll probably be getting into in a moment that also surround the matter, but it's definitely very tense right now.
Yeah, well, yeah, sanctions are definitely a part of it. It really does feel like, at least from the US point of view, this is, I don't know, 10%, 20% about the relationship with Ukraine and the potential future for Ukraine that many people are like condensing down to, well, they were gonna be in NATO next week. So I don't know, the whole thing is just really weird in that respect. But yes, there's the likelihood of sanctions against Russia, against individual members of Putin's administration, against Putin himself. There's also a ton of money that is going to be spent here, or weapons that are gonna be bought and sent to Ukraine or other allies in the region. Like that is a guarantee regardless of what else happens. But I have to be honest about what I think is likely to happen. And like the people who are like, especially in Fox News, who are like, Biden wants war with Putin. I don't think that he wants to fight Russia. I don't think that that's true. And they're continuing to reiterate that they're not sending forces actually into Ukraine. So what it feels like is happening is they want to reassure NATO, obviously. They want to send signals or whatever to Russia, but they're also not gonna send soldiers into Ukraine and get into some sort of actual direct conflict. I don't know if or when Russia is likely to or not invade Ukraine, but I also don't think that they sent over 100,000 troops just for the fun of it. In theory, they could move in to either permanently or at least temporarily invade Ukraine and then use the position that they have to sort of barter for a better domestic political position inside of Ukraine that could benefit Russia in the future. I don't want any of this, but Dan, we're progressives. What the hell does it matter what we want?
Yeah, of course, being progressives, our opinions on foreign policy and war are completely irrelevant, except for when the Democratic Party wants votes. And so the main thing with this that I'm concerned about is that, listen, kind of like what you were saying, John, the United States after World War II just has military bases everywhere. And so whenever there are these kinds of conflicts, there's a whole song and dance where America says, hey, Russia or China or whatever large superpower it is at the time usually, we're gonna move our people towards you. And so don't get aggressive or anything because we're ready to act. It's a show of war and strength. And sure, in war games, high politics, people do these things. But it's been many, many decades of America playing world police. And we see at home the American government is very incapable of managing and handling a number of different things. That being said, that's because we spend so much of our tax money every single year on the war machine. But I'm not necessarily certain that our war incursions or anything like that are that much better. And so what I worry about, I don't think this is going to happen, but this is just where my brain goes, is if this escalates to some type of conflict, and all of the NATO forces, all of the lethal aid, because that's the Orwellian term we're using now, isn't as effective as they thought it would be or figured it would be. And so you start to actually see on a larger world sense this crushing of this idea that, oh, America can just go around the world and do whatever they want to. They'll show up and win the day. If it seems like America's weaker in these situations, then other countries, Russia and China, are going to just take advantage of that weakness. And I'm not a person who is for China bashing or let's get into war with these countries that are just capitalists like the United States. There's no real reason to do this. But I am worried about once war starts and snowballs, it's hard to kind of de-escalate it. And so these things concern me, but I'm hoping, like you're saying, John, that yeah, Joe Biden doesn't want in a midterm election year for an unpopular war to begin when he just got some credit about a lot of heat for winding down things in Afghanistan.
Yeah, and look, like for all of our accumulated thoughts and views about the military-industrial complex, its historic relationship to the U.S. government, the current iteration of that. A war would benefit that, but they also don't need a war. They could just have a really tense situation with Russia that results in us spending a few years spending hundreds of millions of additional dollars every single year. You don't actually have to go to war for that. We're perfectly willing to. Obviously, that has been clear in the Middle East, but I think it's far less likely that Biden is like secretly pining for a hot war with Russia than the US wanted to finally get in and do what it wanted to do to Iraq. I just don't think those are exactly the same situation. Although financially it could end up looking similar.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.